Yeah, I do have some things that I want to talk about today. I was just going to talk about neurodivergence because last week, for those of you who are new to me, I talked about a lot of how I got into doing this, doing my channel, doing podcasting. And I figured I might also talk about, being autistic because the way that I learned about my own neurodivergencies is by other people talking about their experiences. Because for a long, long time, I knew as a kid I was dyslexic. Uh, and then as I got older, I knew about the OCD, I knew about the ADHD. But it wasn't until I got on Twitter and started hearing other people's stories who were neurodivergent and autistic. And it was like they were pulling things out of my head, like experiences that just mirrored it so much that it's like, oh, okay, I get it now. This explains a lot, like a lot from my past. And so I wanted to maybe share some of those experiences again for other people so that you can maybe be like, huh, yeah, that sounds a little bit too familiar. But also, there was some breaking news that's really, oh, not good, not good breaking news. That I feel is important to go over as somebody who is non-binary. The United States is fucked for trans people. Let's see if I can do this right. I get so nervous using this layout because I like to do different things. There we go. It's this one. Share. It's like right in I need that over there. There we go. So here we go. Scroll up. I don't care about the breaking news. I care about this breaking news. So Supreme Court upholds Tennessee ban on gender affirming care for trans youth. I'm not very good at reading things out loud that I'm sight reading. So let's dive into. I was hoping to find an article that wasn't CNN or, I was looking for an article that was from a leftist organization because, I like those biases confirmed in me, but also I just like to support leftist journalism. But this is what was popping up. There was also like BNN and Washington Post and New York Post and all that sort of stuff. But let's go over the article before we get into all the other stuff I was going to talk about today. So the Supreme, I can look forward. I'm looking over at the article, which is over there, but I also, it's a layout thing. It's a layout thing. So the Supreme Court on Wednesday upheld Tennessee ban on gender affirming care for trans minors in blockbuster ruling that will bolster efforts by conservative state lawmakers to pass and preserve other diverse, divisive laws targeting transgender Americans. The 6-3 decision by a conservative majority is a major blow to the transgender community and its advocates at a critical time. Since 2020, Republican-led states around the country, I should also mention here in Canada too, have passed a wave of laws regulating the lives of trans Americans, with particular focus on minors. And President Donald Trump, who ran for re-election in part of the Ending the Transgender Lunacy, has taken several steps intended to roll back gains made by that community. Roughly half the nation's states have bans similar to Tennessee's. Federal courts have disagreed on the constitutionality of those laws, and the Tennessee case filed by the Biden administration was the first to reach the high court. Yeah, I always hear that the United States is the home of the free. It's where you go for freedom. But they really like to dictate what that freedom is in the United States. The court's majority opinion was penned by Chief Justice John Roberts and joined by other 5 members of the conservative wing. The 3 liberals dissented. You see, we don't have this problem so much up here in Canada. And again, for those of you who don't know, I am Canadian, hence the Canadian flag in my logo. We do have a Supreme Court up here, and they look like Santa's helpers. Actually, I might pull up a picture of that later so that you guys can see. In our courts, the way that the judges are selected, it's a very different process than what it is in the United States. Like in the United States, you pretty much just appoint anyone, and then it will just be based on whatever persuasion the president is at the time as to whether they'll be left-leaning, center-leaning, or right-leaning. And let's face it, they're usually center to right. But here in Canada, it's a process, and it's a nonpartisan process. And not just anyone can apply to be a Supreme Court justice or a Supreme Court judge. You have to actually be a judge, and you're put onto a list. And this list is goes through a nonpartisan body that does like questionnaires and stuff to make sure that the judges will uphold the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And then when the time comes around, because we actually do have a retirement age for our judges, which is in the 70s, which is still a bit high. So there's a little bit more predictability as to when that will turn over. And so when it's time to replace one of those judges, what happens is the Prime Minister is given a short list of people who have already been pre-approved by this nonpartisan body. And then they pick one of them. So I've seen a lot of good cases here in Canada where they rule the right way, like the way that, upholds our rights and freedoms. And I've seen, the prime ministers like Justin Trudeau, the past prime minister, totally ignore that and then try to appeal it. And in particular with Justin Trudeau, he would appeal court cases when it came to Indigenous rights or Indigenous justice. So things like compensation for people who went through the residential schools, or the medical assistance that they need because Indigenous folks don't have the same medical coverage as I do. It's an apartheid state up here. And that's not sarcasm. And so there was some judgments in favor of Indigenous peoples that they get billions and billions in payout. Well, the federal government would much rather pay that and more to not rule in that favor, to fight it and to appeal it over and over and over again. And so they can ignore it. And then on a provincial level, what we've been seeing lately is them just totally ignoring it and doing the notwithstanding clause, which is something that is in our, Charter of Rights and Freedoms that needs to be removed. And it's a nuclear option where the sitting party can just say, I don't care what the courts say, and go above them and pass a law with the notwithstanding clause that's in place for 5 years, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's no higher ups because this is superseding the courts. And and regarding to trans rights here in Canada, in Saskatchewan, Scott Moe, the Premier of Saskatchewan, he used the notwithstanding clause to make sure that trans children weren't safe at school. So we have the issues with our conservative-led provinces where they want to out trans children to their parents if those children do not feel safe coming out at home. So it's putting the teachers in the situation of they have to misgender the student, or they'll be outed to their parents. And that was ruled to be unconstitutional for us, that violated the protected rights of trans children. And it did. And that's how the courts ruled. And so Scott Moe did the notwithstanding clause and says, I don't care. We're taking away their rights. We're going to make it so that they're in more danger by doing this because we're conservative assholes and that's what we do. So it's not like we're safe up here in Canada from these laws. We're safer than if we are in the States. And in my area in particular, there was a targeted attack a few years ago at the university where somebody went into the gender studies class and stabbed 3 people. Fortunately, they all survived. And it was specifically basically targeting people like me. And this was right at the end of Pride Month. And it was a statement, it's what it was the statement that they wanted to make. And I have a video on that. If you go to my YouTube channel, you can see the video that I made on it at the time. When I was still very emotional over it. And so we are safer up here relative to the States, but we are not safe. And we need to fight to maintain that safety and to get back all the rights that we're losing up here as well, especially in Alberta, one of the worst provinces for it, where bans like this on all trans affirming care for youth has also been banned in Alberta. And now they're looking to ban books that are, queer related. Anyway, let's get back to the article. The case carries with it the weight of fierce scientific and policy debates about the safety, efficacy, and propriety of medical treatments in an evolving field, Roberts wrote. The voices of these debates raise sincere concerns. The implications for all are profound. The Equal Protection Clause does not resolve these disagreements. Moving forward, under the court's ruling, judges examine bans like Tennessee's Act and potentially other restrictive laws will do so under the lowest standard of judicial review, meaning those other laws are more likely to be upheld by courts. The court abandons transgender children and their families to political whims. Justice Sonia Sotomayor. You see, on my channel, I have a little graphic that I can pop up on screen that says, due to a learning disability, I will mispronounce your names. I have a hard time reading them and understanding how to say them. And I'll be talking a bit more about that when we get into the neurodivergence. So Justice Sonia, a member of the court's liberal wing, wrote in dissent, taking a rare step of reading from the bench, in sadness I dissent. The liberal wing argued that the court's conservative majority had tied itself in knots trying to avoid earlier precedents that said laws affecting transgender Americans necessarily discriminate on the basis of sex. The majority refuses to call a spade, Sonia wrote. Instead, it obfuscates a sex classification that is plain on the face of the statute, all to avoid a mere possibility that a different court could strike down SB1 or categorical health care bans like it. Sonia wrote, in the court's opinion, does irrevocable damage to the Equal Protections Clause and invites legislators to engage in discrimination by hiding blatant sex classifications in plain sight. Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti, a Republican who argued the case at court, described the outcome as a common sense win over judicial activism. This victory transcends politics. No, it's all about politics in the United States court. It's about real Tennessee kids facing real struggles. Families across the states and our nations deserve a solution based on science, not ideology. Well, then, what you're doing is kind of the complete opposite of that, because trans-affirming care is based on science, not ideology. You see, the right-wingers have this way of twisting everything all the time. Groups advocating for transgender Americans decried the decision. Chase Strangio, who will be on the Majority Report next Wednesday, I believe, I was watching today, and he was on earlier to talk about this case. And we'll be back onto the Majority Report to talk more about this, I believe on Wednesday of next week. A lawyer with the American Civil Liberties Union who represents the minors challenging Tennessee's law and who also argued in court said in a statement that the ruling is devastating law for transgender people, our families, and everyone who cares about the Constitution. Politics hovers over decision. The politics of the issue shifted while the case was pending on the Supreme Court's docket. Since returning to power in January, Trump has attempted to remove transgender Americans from the military, that's not an attempt anymore. It's happened. The justices in early May allowed that policy to take effect, and the president signed an executive order barring non-binary markers on U.S. passports. Part of the reason why I feel like I can't travel to the United States right now is I have a non-binary marker on my passport. I had a U.S. credit card. I recently got it canceled because I can't see myself traveling to the States in the foreseeable future. Some polling has suggested softening support for transgender gains among Democrats, including the issue of transgender girls playing on girls' sports teams. Tennessee's SB1 bans hormone therapy and puberty blockers for transgender minors in the state and imposes civil penalties for doctors who violate the prohibitions. It also bans gender-affirming surgeries on youth. That doesn't happen. Sometimes there are chest surgeries for children, and that's usually on cis girls who have overdeveloped. Let's see. But the idea that, there's lower body surgeries happening on children, it's not a thing. It does not happen. The law took effect in 2023. Specifically, the law prohibits providers from administering such care if the purpose is to enable a minor to identify with or live as a purported identity inconsistent with the minor's sex, or treat purported discomfort or distress from discordance between the minor's sex and asserted identity. SB1 was initially challenged by the 3 trans minors in Tennessee, their parents and doctor in the state who practice including treating minors for gender dysphoria. The Biden administration later joined that lawsuit, and the lower federal courts came to a differing conclusions as to the law's constitutionality. Yes, we're going to uphold the Constitution by, keeping everyone's rights, by taking away people's choice of treatments for how they're feeling. Yeah, we're going to limit that. Because it's all about rights, right? Where was I? Shortly after taking office, Tennessee law reversing the ban on the Justice Department position in the case. A slew of other GOP-led states have passed similar healthcare bans in recent years. Today, more than 110,000 teenagers live in states where restrictions on puberty blockers and hormone therapy exist, according to the Williams Institute at UCLA School of Law. A divided Court of Appeals in Cincinnati, 2023, allowed the ban to take effect. See, a lot of the right-wingers like to say, oh, if they take the hormones when they're teenager, it causes irreparable damage and changes in their body and blah, blah, blah. Well, do you know what else does that? Puberty. That also does the same thing. And there were it's my guess, but I would say there were far more people who needed trans-affirming care that weren't getting it, as opposed to people who got it and then thought, In fact, I know for a fact there's far, far more. And there's so many stories that we just don't hear about because the children aren't able to access the medical doctors for it. They can't come out to their parents. They live in a community where it's not accepted. There are far, far more people out there who need the care that aren't receiving it. In the courtroom. Inside the courtroom, Roberts read excerpts from his opinion for 7 minutes. The chief spoke. The chief spoke in his usual flat, steady manner with a tone that suggested things were straightforward. This isn't a classification based on sex, he said, adding that the law drew lines based on age and medical use. He referred to medical studies highlighting various risks with treatment and closed with an admonition that the question was a matter of lawmakers to hash out. Sonia, reading her dissent, spoke for more than twice as long. She spoke empathetically and with urgency about the potential costs to trans youth and the majority abandoning the crucial role of the judicial review. She repeated the line from her opinion that she was dissenting in sadness. This will cost lives. this type of treatment, it will cost lives. What it does to trans youth, how it makes them feel ostracized and isolated and alone and not able to express yourself. It's, yeah. One of the key questions for the High Court was whether the law discriminated based on sex, a finding that would trigger a tougher review by the court under the 14th Amendment. The Biden administration noted that a child born as a girl would be entitled to puberty blockers and estrogen under the state's law for certain medical conditions, but a child born as a boy would not be entitled to those treatments to live as a female. That is sex discrimination, the Biden administration told the Supreme Court. The argument rested on part of a blockbuster decision in 2020 called Bostock versus Clayton County, which found that federal law prohibits workplace discrimination on the basis of sex necessarily also covers gay and transgender workers. That 6-3 decision divided conservatives on the court. Tennessee countered its law was based on age, not sex, and prohibits the use of drugs for specific purposes of facilitating a gender transition. The state argued it had compelling interest in encouraging minors to appreciate their sex. Remember what I was saying about Alberta being like one of the worst province in Canada for that? The premier there, Danielle Smith, there's a video of it, and I covered it at the time, but there's a video of her saying that these children should experience sex first to see if they like it as the gender they are, which is just disgusting and creepy and says a lot about how, to these right-wingers, it has nothing to do with their identity as to who they are. It's all about sex. And I was just like, I was horrified that statement was made, and it boggled my mind that not more attention was given to that statement. It's on film. Like, it's on the internet. You can find that statement where she was saying, you know, the children should see if they like sex first. Yeah, they need to experience sex as the gender they were assigned at birth to see if they like it before they decide if they want to switch it up. Just absolutely disgusting coming from anyone, let alone, you know, the premier of a province. But that's their fixation on sex, the right wing. It's not about self-expression. It's about controlling people's bodies, and especially when it has to do with sex. So encouraging minors to appreciate their sex, and argued it empowered to make decisions regulating medical treatments. That was an argument that appeared to find a receptive audience when the case was argued in December. Absolutely disgusting. Let's see, can I do this? No, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do this. There we go. And do this while I do this. Okay, if you have not seen a picture of the Canadian Supreme Court, you are not prepared for what you are about to see. I need to make that bigger. How do I make that bigger? There we go. There we go. You are not prepared for this. How do I make that bigger? There we go. Oops, wrong screen that I was doing this to. Here we go. I gotta click over here again.
This article by David said.
No, I don't want that. I want to click here so I can do this. That is Canada's Supreme Court. I don't know if this is the current one or not. I don't know how old this article is. July 8th, 2022. You see, like, that's the thing about the Canadian Supreme Court, is you can quiz a lot of Canadians, like, how many judges do we have? They might not be able to tell you, and they wouldn't be able to tell you the name of a single one on it. Like, that's a good sign that it's working well when you don't know their names, actually. Because I think I saw it on The Daily Show once, where they were talking about there's all these parts of your body that you don't know are there. and you only learn about them when they start causing trouble and acting up. And then suddenly you know all about it. And so that's kind of how it is with the Canadian Supreme Court, is that we don't really have issues with them. Hey, no, I don't want local headlines. That is the case for Canada's Supreme Court. Is we generally, like, there have been some controversies, of course there always is, but there hasn't been so many where Canadians are like, oh, that judge on our court whose name is Tom, such a right winger. Like, we don't run into that the same way that you guys do in the States.
Watch this